So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel. Coming to the viewer or viewers from London in the UK on Tuesday, the 11th of January 2022. Now this is part A. Sometimes we are able to accommodate part B and C and D, but the main kind of frequency is once every 24 hours due to various logistical issues. Now, here is the very Boris Johnson supporting, Boris Johnson promoting tabloid, the Fleet Street paper, the Daily Mail, and on an inside spread in today's Daily Mail, that is Tuesday's Daily Mail, 11th of January 2022, is a comment piece by the recently ex or separated wife of Michael Gove, who is also in the news, but let's look at what she's saying. So this is about the latest revelation about Partygate. And since the papers were printed, there have been, of course, online updates. And one Scottish National Party MP has been quoted by the Daily Mirror political editor Pippa Creeder as saying that if Johnson lied to Parliament effectively, I mean, she is not saying that, this is our paraphrasing, that if Johnson had misled Parliament, this is not a kind of new incident, but this is the latest of a series of persistently kind of misleading statements and denials by Johnson. And these are the extracts of the emails. And Sarah Vine, who is the ex-wife of Michael Gove, is saying, the headline to her piece is, "Rage doesn't even begin to cover how I feel about number 10's damn stupidity." Now, although the headline on the front page, splash of the Daily Mail, is kind of quite strong, and although Sarah Vine's headline is quite strong, the Daily Mail is still not asking for Johnson to be treated as a liar. They're looking for excuses. So don't be misled by this kind of heading. The Daily Mail is doing that because, for example, the same set of lies that the number 10 party email bombshell is being treated by Pippa Creeder's paper and Pippa Creeder's copy on the front page of today's Daily Mirror. And that is the reason, because the Daily Mail would be otherwise in complete embarrassment if it denied that revelation of the emails that show that Johnson actually lied. Now, there is nothing on the front page or in the briefing items in the Financial Times. The Financial Times is giving the item a smaller kind of space. Johnson joined staff at number 10 party just after ban warning. Then it is giving to the issue of cost of living crisis. And there is a piece about house prices going up. And that is linked to the help to buy scheme. And that is something to do with the agenda of the 1980s, mid-1980s, where Margaret Thatcher, still in posters, so there has been a kind of short interruption. Now, Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s introduced the right to buy scheme. The right to buy scheme, the help to buy scheme, was funded mainly to make council housings kind of scarce or scarcer. And this is a social kind of engineering, antisocial council housing engineering that made it harder for people in low income, individuals and families, people in low income and people who needed support for housing were made less able to get access to housing, decent housing. So what the Financial Times is saying is that help to buy is blamed for pushing up house prices. Now, this is called property market. The government's flagship 229 billion help to buy scheme has pushed up house prices in England and Wales, and failed to provide good value for money for the taxpayer, according to House of Lords report published today. Cash spent on the scheme could instead have helped to replenish England's plummeting stock of social housing, said the report's authors, who sit on the Lords Built Environment Committee. The scheme, which will have cost around 29 billion in cash terms by 2023, inflates prices by more than its subsidy value in areas where it is needed the most. This funding would be better spent on increasing housing supply, according to the report. Now, this is obvious. It's capitalist corruption and dishonesty and criminality, which were committed by Margaret Thatcher herself with the right to buy, and it is being repeated by her successor, her kind of fans in the Conservative Party, as fronted by Boris Johnson and his cabal. And just to show that Tony Blair was following very much the same ideology when he got into number 10 Downing Street. Well, towards the second half of his, during the second half of his tenure of 10 years as the incumbent in the post, Blair committed antisocial crimes on a massive scale as he caused serious lack of council housing in Tower Hamlets, for example. At that time, of course, Blair's kind of deputy prime minister, so-called, was John Prescott. And Prescott was the environment secretary, so-called, or in the ministry that is now effectively called Communities or Housing Ministry, where Robert Jenrick was in post before he was removed from the cabinet. And again, Jenrick was involved in a different kind of scam in the Isle of Dogs, again in Tower Hamlets. So what John Prescott did was to force, like coerce the Tower Hamlets Council to give away the majority of the council housing stock, and to do so by making a gang of criminals very rich. The gang of criminals called Popular Haque, and the second gang of criminals called Tower Hamlets Community Housing. And the second gang of criminals called Tower Hamlets Community Housing was fronted by a criminal called Mike Tyrrell. Now these people are Mike Tyrrell and Popular Haque and Tower Hamlets councillors and Tower Hamlets Labour Party were all in it together. They combined a criminal kind of force to loot Tower Hamlets Council social housing stock. And they were rewarding one another, praising one another. And in the case of Mike Tyrrell, they were promoting him as achieving something fantastic. Whereas he was a crook, and he is a crook. He had to leave the Tower Hamlets Community Housing after Tower Hamlets Community Housing became unable to justify Mike Tyrrell's kind of regime as the chief executive of the crooked THCH. But he was formally kind of praised by the Tower Hamlets Council Labour Party crooks. Not long after, I presented a number of questions in June 2013 about the role of Tower Hamlets Council in enabling the Tower Hamlets community housing crooks to rob, loot, and to steal the housing stock. And it was during my question to the housing Tower Hamlets Council's full council committee meeting, so-called, in June 2013, that the woman who was the speaker of the council and was presiding over the meeting decided to find a way to disrupt my questions, because she knew Mike Tyrrell and she knew that the question would expose Mike Tyrrell even further. So she interrupted the meeting by an excuse, a dishonest excuse that Leslie Pavitt created by saying that a man who was filming the proceedings was doing something wrong, and she suspended the meeting at the very time when I was in the middle of asking the question. So we shall come to more of that as an update, because I've discussed this before. The essential point is that the Help to Buy scheme, worth 29 billion pounds of public money, is just a very thinly disguised continuation of the Right to Buy scheme that Margaret Thatcher had started in the 1980s. And it is something that is similar in aim, in agenda, in the narrative, to the robbery and thuggery and stealing of the Tower Hamlets Council housing stock by the Tower Hamlets Council colluding with John Prescott. Now, the question I asked Robin Wales in a live television program in March 2018, Robin Wales was on that day, at that time, incumbent in the post of elected mayor at the expense of the people of Newham. And Robin Wales became notorious for his corrupt and antisocial behavior and conduct about housing in Newham. And the reference to his criminality was kind of dealt with by him, saying that it was the Conservatives' policy that caused the varieties of housing crisis in Newham. And I then asked him, did he take court action against the government policy according to the Constitution? The Constitution entitles anyone to seek an intervention by the court against a policy that they think is wrong. And the short answer that Robin Wales gave was that he was legally advised not to take the government to court. And when I asked him, would he let me see the legal advice, he promised on air that he would let me have the legal advice. And after the program ended, I reiterated my question to him, would he let me have the copy of the legal advice? And he reiterated his statement of assurance that he would. Now, this is calendar year 2022, which is 4 calendar years from 2018 when Robin Wales made that particular statement and promise. But Robin Wales never sent me the copy of the so-called legal advice. Let me just say again that even if a legal advice says that a course of action, such as I was saying in context, seeking to challenge the policy of the conservative government headed by Margaret Thatcher, even if the legal advice were to not challenge, the person who made the decision about which the legal advice exists can ignore the legal advice and do the thing that they may think is right, despite the statement of the particular contents of the particular legal advice. And Robin Wales knew that. And because he knew that, he was actually a believer in the corruption that he was blaming on the conservatives. And I said on the live program that he was blaming the conservatives for something that was to be laid at his door, that it was his policy. And I also accused Robin Wales of being a dictator. And I accused him on air, the live program, that he was intimidating the elected councillors. And so, and Robin Wales had no actual truthful answer to my allegations, factual allegations and accusations. Essentially, he was the Labour Party card carrying careerist, opportunist, and he had been, by that time, in post as the executive mayor of Newham, or at the expense of Newham, at the expense of the people of Newham, for 16 years since he started as the executive mayor in 2002. Now, he was followed in the election, of course, by Roxana Fiaz, and Fiaz has tinkered with things, but she has not changed anything in the behavior of Newham Council. So today's Financial Times, that is Tuesday, the 11th of January 2022, is saying that 29 billion pounds being spent in Help to Buy is directly responsible for the rise in housing prices. What the Financial Times is saying, because it's published to further the agenda of conservative capitalism, they are using housing as a market commodity. And our movement says, and the evidence supports, that housing is not a commodity, not a business, a trading kind of resource. Housing has to be taken away from the market and totally socialized for the overwhelming majority of the people who can't ever have the huge sums of money to buy their own homes. So social housing has to be the way forward. But the Financial Times, in their piece, is not supporting And even the Lord's report on which that particular piece in the Financial Times is based is serving the capitalist cause, and there is no social housing establishment being asked for or demanded or suggested or recommended by the Lords, House of Lords. The House of Lords is, of course, the House of Peers. Report. And it's not just the House of Peers in Britain that is against socializing provisions like essential housing. This woman, Anne Hidalgo, a former mayor of Paris, has warned of the death of the left. And the heading is a presidential election in France. It's a piece by Victor Mallet in Paris. And it says 5 years ago, President Francois Hollande stunned France by renouncing a re-election bid, a first in the history of the Fifth Republic, and a sign of his Socialist Party's deep unpopularity. So the piece ends with the kind of unsubstantiated, really, quotation from one of the left. Is a political analyst at the Haque Business School in France. It's Virgin Martin. You never know, the presidential elections in France are full of crazy and unpredictable things. Now, providing socially desirable answers to pressing essential needs in a society is not guaranteeable by relying on crazy and unpredictable things or events at elections. And as we said, Keir Starmer is the political murderer of the Labour Party. By that we mean that there is nothing that Starmer has stated as being the future of politics in the event of a Labour-fronted kind of Labour Party majority government, parliament. And even in this case of Boris Johnson's corruption and congenital lying, even the Murdoch scum is running an editorial today which says, beyond COVID, Boris risks becoming the no-can-do Prime Minister. It would be a depressing turnaround for the man who not got Brexit done, won an election landslide, and led the world on vaccines. But consider his central mission, leveling up those regions lagging behind London's prosperity. And again, despite the appearance of being critical of Boris Johnson, this scum is still peddling him. And in the next piece, which is an opinion piece in the editorial page by Dracula Duncan Smith, it says, Boris, you got the big decisions right. Now finish the job. And this is how the Daily Mail, this scum, are running the so-called criticism of Boris Johnson, which is a propaganda for Boris Johnson. And here is the Guardian on the Same date, the 11th of January 2022. It says furious email reveals number 10 bring your own booze lockdown party. This is the one that is running on the front page of today. And during the kind of hours, let's say the last 12 hours since these items were finalized and put on the printed papers, there have been other kind of developments that are not showing Johnson in a morally acceptable light. He's being condemned as still lying, still denying, because the demand by the Scottish SNP MP that Boris Johnson must make a statement today, that is Tuesday, the 11th of January 2022, and not wait for the Prime Minister's questions due tomorrow. And that if Boris Johnson had or has lied to, Parliament, that's the formal kind of expression. The format is Parliament. Has he misled Parliament? And it is a reference to the sovereignty of Parliament. The Parliament is the one that is the main kind of entity. That's what the SNP man is saying. And there is this update. Let's check what Johnson's update is. So this one is this is timed about so it says about 8 hours ago, the Daily Mail website online said Tories turn on Boris Johnson after bombshell leaked Partygate email. And the Sky News said Partygate mum infuriated after daughter 18 died of cancer on same day as Downing Street party. And the Telegraph says Partygate could finish Boris Johnson and boot the Tories out of number 10. And the Evening Standard says that in a comment, Partygate, we do not need an inquiry to tell us what we can see with our own eyes, which is absolutely correct. And Sky News says Partygate allegations. Boris Johnson can run, but he can't hide. And the Prime Minister is now under enormous pressure. And there is a kind of token piece about the police liaising with Cabinet Office probe over the number 10 Partygate. Well, the police are only reportedly prepared to investigate the law breaking by Boris Johnson in the Partygate scandal because the police have been criticized for previously stating they are not going to investigate. So the police, if they are investigating anything, they are doing so in order to keep their own very kind of limited and declining kind of credibility with the people. And we move to HS2. from the corruption of Partygate and breaking the rules and Boris Johnson's lying. HS2 is doing a promotion in The Guardian about uncovering wealthy Roman trading center buried under field. Now, how is that economically a compensation for the theft of more than 100 billion pounds of public money by the crooks and contractors cabals and the conglomerate of corrupt contractors, conglomerate of corrupt capitalist contractors, who are the ones who are getting the 106 billion and rising public money. So this is not something that can be justified, as we said in the past. And the fact that it cannot be justified and yet it is being continued is the pattern of Boris Johnson's cabal. Absolutely criminal abuse of his position. He's not going to change the policy. And the Guardian comments, comment by the paper and by Politonby, and also there is an opinion piece about the HS2. But this opinion piece is by somebody who supports HS2. And the fact that there is a supporter of HS2 writing an opinion piece in The Guardian saying, our railways are in a perfect storm, it's time to nationalize. That actually is a lie. The railways are in crisis, of course. But nationalization without creating the actual democratic audit and accountability regime will not solve the crisis in the railways. And this person, whose name is Christian Wolmer, is a dishonest person, a dishonest careerist. So this program, or this series of programs called Diagnosis, World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. Now, if you have looked, we have looked at the Daily Mail, we have looked at the scum, we've looked at the financial crimes, we've looked at the Guardian, let's say, the main. And everything said by these papers, even when they're apparently saying things under the headings of being critical of Boris Johnson fronted cabal, they're not really being critical, because they are being critical in the form, in the kind of statements, part of the statements, but they're not, because, for example, the scum editorial praises Johnson under a heading which shows the scum to be critical. And next to the editorial is the piece by Dracula Duncan Smith, who is praising Boris Johnson against a headline that suggests that he is criticizing Boris Johnson. So this is the reality of our findings. This is what we find in the World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. And as we have said in the financial crimes about the housing, there is no real, truthful There is no real truthful kind of action by the editors of the Fleet Street papers, or the editorial policy implementers, decision makers on the Fleet Street papers, because everything they publish has the appearance that is dubious, because they appear to be critical of Boris Johnson's wrongful decisions, but then in the actual text they appear to be lauding, quote, his achievements. Now, today's column by Piers Morgan's wife, Celia Walden, in the Daily Buying Boris Johnson Group, by bribing Boris Johnson Group, is apparently about a different thing than what she has written in the last few months. And let's see what she is saying in today's edition of our column. And she's talking about she's saying that young adult novels are more challenging than those found on degree courses. This is a kind of attempt, very thin attempt by Celia Walden to appear to be writing an independent column. Independent of the careerist needs of her husband. Piers Morgan. And there is a piece in the Daily Buying Boris Johnson Group by Cheryl Jacobs, which is headed Omicron has humiliated Britain's dismal lockdown establishment. And the piece about Burma and Aung San Suu Kyi being promoted as the victim of the military is exposed in the piece, saying that she has been sentenced to 4 more years in prison. Notice that is not her being sentenced to 4 more years in prison because of her genocide of the Muslim Rohingyas in collusion with the military, but because of her separate row with the military. So therefore they are not penalizing her because of her genociding the Rohingya Muslims. They're penalizing her as part of the struggle for power and control, that the struggle is going on between her and the army, both of whom, Aung San Suu Kyi and the Burmese military, agree entirely on a genocidal level that the Rohingyas deserve to be genocided And then neither the military nor Aung San Suu Kyi has apologized, let alone recognized the rights of the Rohingyas. And there is nothing in the pieces. Well, this one is the latest in the daily buying Boris Johnson graph about Burma. There is nothing about Rohingyas. Not even the fact that the Rohingyas kind of center, the biggest refugee center based in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, where there has been a fire. There has been no coverage in the Fleet Street papers about the fire that killed any number of people, because the final number is never known in Bangladesh, of people either dying of capsized boats or fires in the buildings. I mean, if it can be said that there is any system in place in Bangladesh for protecting, saving people from fires or preventing fires, if it can be said, then there is absolute zero, because there is no system. And the reason why there is no system to save people from fires and prevent lethal fires and boating accidents and overcrowded trains, the transport system in Bangladesh is non-existent. There is no system. And the same thing with the safeguarding of the people in buildings in urban areas and elsewhere. And the reason why there is none is because there is no democracy in terms of the decision makers at every stage being held to real, actual, and timely account. So this is just a few weeks. Well, this is the 11th of January, so it's 3 weeks since the anniversary of Bangladesh, 50th anniversary of Bangladesh, which was officially declared as an independent state on the 16th of December 1971. And the main slogan has been that it's freedom fight, or the war for freedom, liberation war. But beyond the slogan, where is the reality? Where is the liberation kind of practice? The fruits of liberation, the product of liberation for the people who were supposedly promised the fruits of liberation by those who claim to have been the supporters of the agenda for justice and fairness and equality and tolerance. Where are those? Because the many in Bangladesh, that is to use the paraphrase associated with Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party, the many as opposed to the few. The many in Bangladesh, which is hundreds of millions of people, have no clue, no idea from their day-to-day experience of what it is to, quote, live or exist, more accurately, in a land that has been liberated. And the liberation is, of course, relevant to the military operation of the then Pakistan military against the civilians in the country. Now, these are the statements of slogan. That is to say, there have been no real chapter and verse account of the people who were actually targeted and murdered and massacred and raped and violated by the Pakistan military. What is most commonly in use is a pack of slogans. So there is no real account of how many people are victimized, how many people were murdered, massacred. And there is no real evidence of people being compensated. The victims of the attack by the military, the Pakistan military, have not been paid real recognition by being paid compensation. And of course, that only applies to those who survived. Those who have been murdered and massacred cannot be compensated in any way. So the country has been, in kind of official references, a country liberated from the occupation by the Pakistan junta. That is true. But then that is it. That's a cul-de-sac. That is a kind of end of the road. There is no delivery of the liberation to the ordinary people. And it applies to all the known political parties, groups, factions. And there are still active among the population a significant number of people who were involved in 1971, one way or the other. And many of them claim since 1971, since December 16th, 1971, they have claimed to have been key fighters in the war of liberation or war for liberation. What are they doing? What have these key fighters for liberation of Bangladesh have been actually doing in the last 50 years? Because they have been alive for the last 50 years. What have they been doing? Have they been supporting universal standard of democracy? Have they been supporting universal values of democracy, accountability, and justice? Because to a population which has been affected by a war of liberation that has included mass murders, mass rapes, and mass crimes against all sections of the population, the people are legitimately entitled, the ordinary people, legitimately entitled to ask, where is the fruit of liberation when we go to court or when we need to go to court of law or a court of law? Where is the fruit of liberation when we need the protection from crime, violence, theft, and other illegality by asking the police to protect us? Where is liberation when young women or women of other ages are targeted by rapists, individual rapists, gang rapists? How many rapists have been dealt with in the last 50 years? How many rapists in Bangladesh have been dealt with properly in order to influence real behavior by others and to serve as a real life kind of set of deterrents so that no one would dare to rape a woman or violate a woman or a child or a girl or a older woman? Where is the list of the holders of public posts and positions who have committed crimes at various levels or various types? Where is the list of them being tried and found guilty and convicted and sentenced to exemplary sentences? How many politicians, political post holders in Bangladesh from 1972 beginning, let's say, to now, how many of them have been forced to resign? And how many of them have been banned for life from public life? Banned for life from having any platform, public positions. How many murderers have been really tried? How many murderers have been excused because they have been able to cite their support for the ruling party of today or the ruling parties of the past? And the list goes on. So we go back to looking at Bangladesh and 50 years of Bangladesh in due course later. Now, let's look at this country in the UK and look at today's Daily Mirror on page 2. And it says, terror of television license letters. And this is the piece on the page 2 of the Daily Mirror. Now, our campaign is very firmly familiar with the BBC's television license terrorists. They're not only licensed terrorists, but they're licensed criminals. Television licensed criminals, thugs, and serial attackers and thugs and criminals who are constantly breaking the rule and lying because they don't have any shame or kind of sense of shame. When their behavior is scrutinized and they're asked to provide evidence of communications, evidence of payments, television license, because, for example, television license is paid from an address in Brick Lane in Tower Hamlets, London, E1. Television license has been paid for a whole year. And when asked to provide the copy of the receipts, the liars in the television license organization say that they don't keep receipts. Can you believe that? Now, this is a statement on air, on the record. So anyone who knows of similar behavior by the television license criminals can contact us through the usual direct message. Just give the key details, key facts, no conversation. And there is nothing. Television license has been harassing people and and attacking people and violating innocent license fee payers for decades. And there is no evidence. There is absolutely no evidence. There is no record. There is no proof that any court of law in this country, in the UK, has truthfully upheld a claim against a victim, a target of the television license fee terrorists. Whatever this piece is saying, what is the piece is saying is not unique. TV license officials are terrorists terrorizing over 75s who have been stripped of free licenses. Letters sent by Capita, the firm that enforces the licensing system, to people who have not paid up, say a probe is underway and a visit has been authorized, accompanied by threats of £1,000 fine. Letters are addressed to the occupier. Campaign group Silver Voices says it is a ruse to create fear and has left people feeling dehumanized. And there is no evidence that any court of law in England, in the UK, has issued a ruling truthfully dealing with the terrorists posing as television license fee collectors during the last few decades, any time. And this is the same as the open robbery of the kind of state sector by the Conservatives, especially the National Health Service, which is being openly looted and robbed by the Conservatives, setting up alternative private health system. And that will be the way to go. That is how they're moving the NHS out of existence, pushing the NHS out of existence. And again, there is no action by Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer knows that millions of people are traumatized by the television license terrorists. But Keir Starmer is silent. That is, politically, Starmer is dead. And the members of parliament, in Starmer's kind of side, are silent as well. Just as the so-called elected councillors in the country, in England, are silent. There is absolutely nothing in the Fleet Street papers that shows the slightest sign that there is life, the democratic life, in the behavior of the elected councillors anywhere. So even including the majority, the overwhelming majority of the elected councils, let's say, that don't have an elected mayor, the authorized dictatorial system. Now here is a promotion in the Financial Times by this person, Sarah O'Connor. And it is under employment. And it is a promotion of the corrupt licensed law traders business. And we shall come to the particular details that we use, details of the evidence that we use to call them corrupt. What the Financial Times piece by Sarah O'Connor is headed Don't roll your eyes when lawyers complain about overwork. And she's saying that many of the lawyers are overworked. And that she says that there are junior lawyers, that is licensed law traders, who are forced to do long hours. And that is she says there are good reasons for long hours in sectors such as law, where associates at top firms are expected to bill between 1900 and 2200 hours a year, according to an FT Big Read on the topic. Clients expect service around the clock. Issues can blow up suddenly, and detailed work doesn't always lend itself to baton passing between colleagues in a shift system. There is also simple arithmetics. If you pay an associate an annual salary but charge their time to clients in 6-minute blocks, it makes sense to extract as many associates as possible. Yes, many drop out along the way, but a law firm is a pyramid with fewer spots at the top anyway. Plenty of people opt into this system in exchange for high salaries and a shot at partnership. The problem is it's making them sick. In a survey last year of 1,700 legal professionals, that is licensed law traders, in the UK and Ireland by Law Care, a mental health charity, 69% said they had experienced mental ill health in the previous year. More than a third were sleeping 6 hours or less a night. It's not just mental health that suffers when you overwork. Last year, a study by the World Health Organization concluded that working 55 or more hours a week is associated with an estimated 35% higher risk of a stroke and a 17% higher risk of dying from ischemic, is it ischemic? Ischemic heart disease compared to working 35-40 hours a week. Your body breaks when you work too much, regardless of whether you are paid £10 or £200 an hour. Subha Singh, who left his law firm and is now legal director at the International Transport Workers Federation, says it doesn't make sense to disregard overworked lawyers simply because they are better paid than truckers. For me, high paying professionals shouldn't be exempt from these sorts of discussions. He tells me we should expect any workplace, irrespective of pay, to abide by national laws and prevailing national standards. For me, the biggest concern is occupational safety and health. Burnout is the law profession. Burnout in the law profession, combined with growing demand, is one causing staffing problems even though salaries have risen further. It's a reminder for other sectors facing labor shortages that higher wages cannot fix everything. The shortage of HGV drivers, for example, that is heavy goods vehicles, for example, has prompted many to conclude that employers must simply pay them More poor pay has been part of the problem. But drivers don't just want more money, they want less exhaustion and more opportunity for a family life. It would be difficult and costly to reform the entrenched long hours. I'll read that again. If it would be difficult and costly to reform the entrenched long hours culture in sectors such as law, but there would also be gains, and not just for people's health. Farms would be able to access more talented people who can't or won't work 70-hour weeks. Clients might benefit too, since it is hard to believe the quality of white collar work does not suffer when people are so tired. It's time to stop the eye rolling when overworked lawyers and bankers object to their working conditions and call on their industries to change. They might not need sympathy, but they do deserve support. Now, this Sarah O'Connor piece is stupid. It leaves out the clients whom she deals with in 5 words. Can you believe this? Is it 4 words? Clients might benefit too. That's it. And yet, clients are the ones that are the foundation and the main basis for the hours, whatever, whether long hours or short hours, and the huge remunerations that licensed lottery traders are given and can demand. Of course, the mental health issues, the issues of long hours, and all of the other points that she has made are factually correct. But she has made them in the point that doesn't actually recognize the existence of the so called clients. And what are the clients? Clients are the people whose lives are being destroyed by the violations and by the various wrongs that they want remedied by the intervention of lawyers when they approach the lawyers. And the majority of the sufferers, the losers in the licensed law trade or licensed law traders kind of negligent profession are the so-called clients, the many. And we go back again to the boast by David Neuberger, the president of the Supreme Court, who retired in 2017, and who was reported as saying in July 2017 that once our judges get back our common law devices, everything will be rosy and honky-dory and wonderful. There was a lie. There were serial lies inherent in the statement David Neuberger made at the behest of David Lidington, and while he addressed a very small group of Australians in London, of all places, in July 2017. Lawyers are lying, licensed law traders are lying, licensed law traders are obstructing access to fair remedies sought by people complaining against decision makers, generally and especially against decision making departments and government, for example, in the case of the depraved DEFRA. The depraved DEFRA gave the instructions, depraved instructions and lies against BabyAngelGeronimo. When the depraved DEFRA was involved in litigation, which was in each case started by the best friend of Baby Angel Geronimo. And a series of High Court decisions were made completely corruptly, completely illegally, completely dishonestly, completely by breaking the law, breaking domestic UK law and breaking international law and international law treaties and agreements and requirements, and by breaking objective standards of evidence. These are the three criminals, also known as the High Court judges: Murray, Griffiths, and Stacey. Each of them made their own version of criminality and lying as they denied justice, fairness to the claims correctly made, factually made, truthfully made against the liars of the depraved DEFRA. In the context of the defamation and the lies and the untruths that had been confected, cooked up by the depraved DEFRA against the most healthy, most innocent Baby Angel Geronimo. So when Sarah O'Connor talks about licensed law traders, Sarah O'Connor is completely in ignorant denial about what goes on within the walls of the courts. English courts are corrupt courts. English courts are obstructive courts. English courts are non-existent, and English courts are not operating in the fairy tale fantasy scenario mode that David Neuberger boasted about. Common law devices. The common law devices does not automatically mean that there will be justice when these devices are applied. Common law devices have been used for decades, centuries, hundreds of years to deny justice, deny fairness to people like the Baby Angel Geronimo. Baby Angel Geronimo as people, because Baby Angel Geronimo has been represented by human beings before these criminal liars, lawyers, Murray, Griffiths, and Stacey. And if any action were taken against the license fee terrorists, TB licensed terrorists, then there would be no high court judge, no court judge in this country who would take the right, just, and fair kind of step in identifying the TB licensed terrorists as terrorists, identifying the TB licensed terrorists as violating all the UK's international treaty obligations. Now, this applies not only to the kind of licensed fee law lawyers and the licensed law traders. Licensed law traders is what I meant, not licensed fee terrorists, which is a separate topic but the related topic. The licensed law traders include the 4 Inns of Court that issue licenses to criminals posing as barristers, licensed barristers. So the Lincoln's Inn, Gray's Inn, Inner Temple, Middle Temple, these are the 4 Inns of Court that are connected with the issuing of licenses for legal trading to licensed law traders, who then become licensed law traders. And the Law Society of England and Wales is the one that issues licenses to operators, criminals called solicitors. As individuals, we call them sole cheaters. And the Institute of Legal Executives issues the licenses for the 3rd tier, if you like, or 3rd category of licensees, licensed law traders. Now, none of these groups of licensed law traders is involved in, engaged in the professions to challenge authoritarian, draconian, dictatorial, corrupt, fascistic regimes, either in the central government in the UK or in any agencies that are linked with any central government department. And there is no atmosphere in the House of Commons, for example, to actually oppose authoritarian behavior, licenses, options, and freedoms enjoyed by the anti democratic institutions, agencies in this country which have been enjoying these anti democratic options and prerogative and kind of freedoms for centuries. So you go back to the question of the Hillsborough disaster, the Grenfell Tower, Stephen Lawrence murder, and the Macpherson inquiry, the Brixton riot, so called, in 1981, and the Scarman inquiry. What do we find? When Scarman, Leslie Scarman, who was a Court of Appeal judge, High Court House of Peers judge, when Leslie Scarman, published his kind of report into the Brixton riot, so called 1981, Scarman was raised to the skies in praise. And even the entry on the Wikipedia about Scarman, let's say, gives the game away. So Scarman, his full name is Leslie George Scarman, who died in December 2004, aged 93. And he was born in Lambeth, Streatham. So his full name is given in this threatening kind of description. Leslie George Scarman, Baron Scarman, OBE, PC, was an English judge and barrister who served as a law lord until his retirement in 1986. Scarman was born in Streatham but grew up on the border of Sussex and Surrey. He won scholarships to Radley College and then Brasenose College, Oxford, where he read classics, graduating in 1932 with a first. He was called to the bar at the Middle Temple in 1936, and he remained briefless until World War II, which he spent in the Royal Air Force as a staff officer in England, North Africa, and then continental Europe. He was present with Arthur Tedder when Alfred Jody surrendered to Reims. He was appointed an officer of the Order of the British Empire in 1944. He returned to law in 1945, practicing from chambers at 2 Crown Office Row, known since the 1970s as Fountain Court Chambers. And in the late 1940s and early 1950s, he started to build the chamber's reputation for commercial litigation, together with Alan Orr and Melford Stevenson, supported by a notable clerk, Cyril Batchelor. He became a Queen's Counsel in 1957. That was in his 40s, when he was in his 40s. Scarman was appointed a High Court judge in 1961, assigned to the Probate, Divorce, and Admiralty Division, etc., etc. After entering the House of Lords, remember this word Lords, as we say, it is to be deemed as being House of Peers. We are only reading the record for accuracy in quotation, but our moral and diagnostic description and name and replacement is Peers. He was Chancellor of the University of Warwick, President of the British Institute of Human Rights, and worked on behalf of the Prince's Trust, the Birmingham Six, and Charter 88, among many other projects. In 1991, he set up the Scarman Trust. He married Ruth Wright in 1947, with whom he had one son. He died in 2004 as is at his home in Westgate-on-Sea. And they say that Scarman, in popular culture, is noted by his appearance in the final episode of a series one of BBC One drama, Ashes to Ashes, and he was played by Jeffrey Palmer. Now that is Scarman's entry personally in Wikipedia. It doesn't refer at all to the Scarman report, which we now go into. The Scarman report, it says in the wiki entry. Remember, we are only referring to wiki entry because that's the temporary. There is time-wise, it takes the shortest time to get access to an article online. So we try that one to save time because of the broadcasting nature. The Scarman report was commissioned by the UK government following the 1981 Brixton riots. And again, the Lord occurs various times there. It should be deemed to be peer. Scarman was appointed by then Home Secretary William Whitelaw on the 14th of April 1981, 2 days after the rioting ended, to hold the enquiry into the riots. The Scarman report was published on the 25th of November, the same year, 1981. And the terms of reference for this enquiry were, quote, to inquire urgently into the serious disorder in Brixton on 10th and 12th of April 1981, and to report with the power to recommend, to make, and to report with the power to make recommendations. And I was there on one day of the riots, but not at the center, but on the periphery, just to be outside of the range of the physical violence, but close enough to observe some of the activities, because you cannot observe everything from a distance. The terms of reference for the inquiry were to inquire urgently into the serious disorder in Brixton on 10th to 12th of April 1981, and to report with the power to make recommendations. Now, Scarman reported a shift from a concern about race relations to community relations. According to Paul Rich, Lord Scarman's views expressed in the Scarman report most closely resembled that of the mid-Victorian era. Scarman was concerned with the plight of the ethnic communities in UK inner cities and their relationship with the rest of the national community. He concluded that it was essential that people are encouraged to secure a stake in, feel a pride in, and have a sense of responsibility for their own areas. While its importance of community involvement in policing was recognized, the Scarman report pointed to community redevelopment and planning as the main area of concern. Scarman called for a policy of direct, coordinated attack on racial disadvantage. Now, just topically, we talk about the corrupt behavior by Tony Blair. Now, Tony Blair undid, in effect, several of the recommendations contained in Leslie Scarman's report into Brixton Riot. When Tony Blair asked John Prescott to bully Toronto's council into handing over billions of pounds worth of social council housing stock to the gang of crooks, Tony Blair was exacerbating, making worse the race-related disadvantage that thousands of people were in Tower Hamlets. And it can be said that Blair, when he refused to create an accountability regime by law for racist police personnel to be held to account, because he said, according to a recent piece in The Guardian, Blair said, or his advisor said, and Blair agreed with that statement or policy statement, that if they did take a real legislation and brought it into being, and through that made the police, racist police, accountable, then it would become a cause célèbre for this paper. If that is what Blair did, he relied on the reaction, on the supposed reaction on the part of this paper in the late kind of 90s. Then, of course, Tony Blair is a more deeply exposed idiot, because nothing has been done in this country by any government, any prime minister incumbent in the number 10 Downing Street, that can be said to have been so closely kind of connected with the response, a possible response, or touted response on the part of any of the Fleet Street titles. Because by definition, every government policy is open to be commented on either adversely or favorably by any title in Fleet Street or in the rest of the England, which constitutes actually part of Fleet Street in terms of the agenda, the narrative, etc., etc. But the reality of government by inquiries, reality of government or governance by judicial inquiries, let's say, as, for example, associated with Leslie Scarman in relation to the Brixton riots of 1981, or the Macpherson report, or the Macpherson inquiry about the racist murder and the police, the London Metropolitan Police's role in the aftermath of the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence, or the current inquiry that has been going on into the Grenfell Tower massacres, or the Levison inquiry into the phone hacking by Fleet Street, especially by the Murdoch papers, but not completely exclusively. These are all judges. So what do they have in common in terms of the actual outcome of their so-called inquiries? What is called the fudge? Because there was a commission that said there was another inquiry called the Swan inquiry. Let's say what this Swan inquiry was about. So, strangely enough, there is no entry that can be located at this time in this moment about the Swan committee. Now, whatever have they done to hide the Swan? So there is a Swan committee in reference, but there is no entry on the Swan committee that I can locate at this time. Why that is will be clear later. So there is no entry on the Wikipedia about the Swan committee, but there was a Swan committee, let's say. And the Swan committee published its findings during the 1980s. And I was probably the most comprehensive kind of critic of the Swan committee because of the campaign that I organized and mobilized on the record, called the Black Parents Association, along with the London Collective of Black Governors. later, the main Black Parents Association diagnosed the Swan Committee and its racist kind of contents and role. And the reason why I got involved with the Swan Committee behavior or proceedings is because a number of people from the Inner London Education Authority were involved as peddlers, promoters of the Swan Committee. And one of the employees of the Inner London Education Authority, a man who is no longer alive, called Trevor Carter, was a member of the Swan Committee. And it was Trevor Carter whose kind of apologies for the Swan Committee was the main reason for my coining the phrase, which I am kind of known for. I coin phrases like that. I called it the Black Swans. And the magazine Black Parents that I created, wrote, researched, and edited had references to the Black Swans in effect. But the main references were in the other monthly journal called Benth Bulletin. Benth being spelled B-E-N-T-H, denoting Bangladeshis' educational needs in Tower Hamlets. Both the Benth magazine and the Black Parents magazine belong to my continuing contextual evidential updater response to and against the contents and the agenda and the narrative of Thomas Babington Macaulay. Thomas Babington Macaulay, of course, had been prominent in the 1830s with his prescription, racist prescription, colonialist prescription against the people of the subcontinent. And what Macaulay said in the 1830s, let's see if we can access it. So this is dated the 1835 by Thomas Babington Macaulay, Minute on Education, which was coinciding with the English Education Act. Now look at the frightening list of things that he's described as. Thomas Babington Macaulay, First Baron Macaulay, FRS, FRSE, PC. He died when he was aged 59. He died in December, 28th of December, 1859, as it says. Now, I'm going to see if I can find the reference to the most notorious statement about India. And here is one. There are three there, but one is here. Neither Sanskrit nor Arabic poetry matches that of Europe. In other branches of learning, the disparity was even greater, he argued. He said, it will hardly be disputed, I suppose, that the department of literature in which the Eastern writers stand highest is poetry. And I certainly never met with any Orientalist who ventured to maintain that the Arabic and Sanskrit poetry could be compared to that of the great European nations. But when we pass from works of imagination to works in which facts are recorded and general principles investigated, the superiority of the Europeans becomes absolutely immeasurable. It is, I believe, no exaggeration to say that all the historical information which has been collected from all the books written in the Sanskrit language is less valuable than what may be found in the most paltry abridgments used at preparatory schools in England. In every branch of physical or moral philosophy, the relative position of the two nations is nearly the same. So the entry is saying, hence, from the sixth year of schooling onwards, instruction should be in European learning, with English as the medium of instruction. This would create a class of anglicized Indians who would serve as cultural intermediaries between the British and the Indians. The creation of such a class was necessary before any reform of vernacular education. And then he says, I feel that it is impossible for us with our limited means to attempt to educate the body of the people. We must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. That is, the millions of people in the subcontinent. A class of persons, this is the crucial part. A class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in tastes, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. To that class, we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from the Western nomenclature, and to render them by degrees fit. I'll read that again. To that class, we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from the Western nomenclature, and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge to the great mass of the population. By that mass of the population, he obviously meant what is now India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, plus a bit more on the sides. Macaulay's minute largely coincided with Bentinck's views, and Bentinck's English Education Act 1835 closely matched Macaulay's recommendations. In 1836, a school named La Martiniere, founded by Major General Claude Martin, had one of its houses named after him. But subsequent governors general took a more conciliatory approach to existing Indian education. Macaulay's final years in India were devoted to the creation of a penal code as the leading member of the Law Commission. In the aftermath of the Indian Mutiny of 1857, Macaulay's criminal law proposal was enacted. The Indian Penal Code in 1860 was followed by the Criminal Procedure Code in 1872 and the Civil Procedure Code in 1908. The Indian Penal Code inspired counterparts in most other British colonies, and to date many of these laws are still in effect, and places as far apart as Pakistan, Singapore, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe, as well as in India itself. Now, how dare the Wikipedia morons use the word far apart? India and Bangladesh and Pakistan are very much part of the same land, apart from many other things. How could they be far apart? So Macaulay was a most ignorant, racist, with pernicious racist kind of proposals and attitude about the people of the subcontinent. Now I learned the structure and the contents of the effect of the English language right in the house where I was born, in Silot. Nothing to do with anything that Macaulay said. I learned that as a skill, as a particular skill, like I learned other languages at the same time. And my understanding of the world and my understanding of the situations across the world is not in the slightest influenced by what Macaulay said. That is to say, Macaulay said that people, the literature, the contents of the language, English language compositions, poetry, and other things were superior by the fact that it was English, superior to Sanskrit, as he says, and Arabic. Strangely, he doesn't mention any other languages. In the main, he does recognize the existence, but not in the intensity that he has actually referred to Sanskrit and Arabic. Now, there are hundreds of other languages in the subcontinent, not just Sanskrit and Arabic. There are hundreds of other languages. But Macaulay didn't mention those, nor did Banting. Banting was the Governor General of the colonized India, the subcontinent. And the Wikipedia entry actually makes a typically dishonest and racist reference to the uprising of 1857. We shall come to all of those in due course in updated forms. Let's go back again. Let's take a look at this page on the financial crimes, on page 3 of the financial crimes of Tuesday, the 11th of January 2022. Now, this is the piece by George Parker and Sebastian Payne in the financial crimes on the social gatherings. And in the third paragraph of the piece, George Parker and Sebastian Payne say, the position of Martin Reynolds, Johnson's principal private secretary since 2019, was in jeopardy after it emerged he organized the event for number 10 staff. Now, this is stupid. This is stupid and typical of the corruption, the complacency in corruption, in which Thomas Babington Macaulay festered, even when he was doing the diary, allegedly in the name of education in India, or educating the people of the subcontinent. This piece in the Financial Crimes about FTB greed, the financial services. Now, the description says Brexit hurt the UK financial centre. Then it goes on to the weakness of the European Union itself. But a lack of political will is holding back Europe's efforts to reduce its dependence on London. The result is less a big bang and more a steady drain to several capitals. For someone who started their career working on the floors of the London Stock Exchange, the hours after the UK's exit from the single market could hardly have been more wrenching. This is a piece by Sam Fleming, Philip Stafford, and Laura Noonan. An additional reporting by Martin Arnold in Frankfurt and Sarah White in Paris. Now, who is he referring? Who are they, Fleming and Stafford and Noonan? Who are they referring to as someone who started their work or started their career working on the floors of the London Stock Exchange? In a single day, Alistair Haynes, that is the chief executive of the Equis Exchange, a UK share trading venue, that is who they're referring to. He watched virtually all share trading business that he had courted over 8 years being yanked out of London and transferred in January 2021 to the European Union exchanges. The stunning shift, which affected £6 billion of trading in European shares that day, 6 billion, seemed emblematic of the blow by Brexit to the City of London, or City of London's status as Europe's dominant financial capital, a harbinger of lost business for London and fresh opportunities for rivals such as Frankfurt, Paris, and Amsterdam. A year down the road, the story looks less dramatic and clear cut, says Haynes, whose customers moved to an EU domiciled subsidiary in Paris. The manner of the UK's departure was undoubtedly an own goal by London, he says, but the European Union is struggling to map out a winning strategy of its own to build up its capital markets. So that's the summary in that part, anyway. In Brussels, the overriding view is that the status quo needs to change, even if achieving this will be a project that takes years. As one senior EU official puts it, the goal is not to stop doing business with the City of London, but rather to do it on a sustainable basis. We put a lot of eggs in the London basket, which made sense when the UK was part of the EU, says the official. But now a lot of our key infrastructure is outside the Union, which is not a comfortable place to be in the long term. So there are graphs, there are the diagrams. There are 3 diagrams with that article. The first one is Amsterdam has outpaced London in equity trading. And the second one in the middle is EU fails to dislodge UK's global dominance of clearing. And the third and final one is London holds on to its derivative business. So what this piece is talking about is that many of the financial behavior and decisions in the post-Brexit European Union are being hampered by the excessive costs of moving the operations out of London. And that actually is part of the explanation as to why the propaganda in the UK against the European Union was able to mesmerize so many people who voted for the Brexit. Because the European Union bureaucracy has been, right from the beginning and throughout its existence so far, a corrupt, incompetent, and dishonest bureaucracy. Now, these 2 names that are coming up were Labour Party members, and they were both commissioners, European commissioners. One was Peter Mandelson, and the other Neil Kinnock. Now, in addition to these 2, all the UK members of European Union, MEPs, the members of the European Parliament, all the members of the European Parliament over the decades, regardless of who started as an MEP or as a European bureaucrat, they were all absolutely, I mean by MEPs, those ones that were supportive of the continued existence of the European Union. All of them, and I don't include Nigel Farage, of course, or Daniel Hannan, the main kind of pro-European members of the MEP, including the crooks, Neil Kinnock, and the crook, well, Peter Mandelson. And we are only talking about the Labour ones, but the Tory ones were as bad. All the MEPs from the UK, from any constituency in the UK, contributed in terms of image, in terms of the narrative, in terms of the propaganda, contributed over decades to the negative image that was emerging of the European Union. And to this day, there has been no change in that particular kind of tendency. Even the so-called New European, that is supposed to be a weekly publication and a news network or news outlet supportive of the European Union, they are not doing the right thing by making available the values of the European Union in international terms. because they have not discussed, let alone strongly discussed or explained, the values of international kind of coalition and international cooperation among nations, among states. And they have not. The anti-Brexiteers have not been subjected to the rigorous analysis of racism and related political agenda. And the European Union singularly failed to take on the actual falsehood propagated on the floor of the European Parliament by Daniel Hannan and Nigel Farage for years about the benefits internationally, liberating benefits offered by the various human rights kind of declarations and the existence of the principle of the existence, the principle underlying the existence of the various international courts. And within the UK, in the run-up to the referendum of June 19, 2006, in the run-up to the referendum of the June 2016 in the UK against the UK remaining in the EU, that kind of debate was completely empty from the side that was supposedly supportive of the European Union. I said that at the time. Nobody else said it. And I said every single day that the benefits of international coalition and cooperation, like the European Union membership, were completely absent from the table. And the main leadership was being allowed to be grabbed hold of by the likes of Farage and the opportunist congenital liar Boris Johnson, who peddled serial lies, brazenly peddled serial lies against the EU. And the most notorious lie, or one of the most notorious lies perpetrated by Boris Johnson, one of the most notorious lies perpetrated by Boris Johnson was aimed at Turkey. Now, Boris Johnson lied through his teeth by saying that millions of Turks were going to arrive in the UK or in Britain if Britain didn't leave the European Union. That was a multi-layered lie by Boris Johnson, in the sense that in the lie against Turkey, there was this lie that Turkey was a member of the European Union. And secondly, that Turkey was about to become a member of the European Union, and that Turkey was eligible to become a member of the European Union. All these three were lies. And of course, even if Turkey were a member of a European Union, of which UK was a member as well, did not automatically allow even 1 million Turks to invade England, or a single Turk to invade England in the way that Boris Johnson paraded. And so the European Union people, or the supporters of the European Union, or supporters of the UK's continuing membership of the EU, during the debate and since the debate up to this day, have failed to tell the truth about the many objectively defined and objectively accessible benefits of the UK remaining a member of the European Union. Now, this piece on the front page of the Guardian, apart from the fact that there is this leading piece, but furious email reveals number 10 bring your own booze lockdown party. This other piece is about cuts leaving pollution incidents unattended. Now, that's not a one off kind of scandal about the environment. This is part and parcel, integrated part and parcel of the lack of accountability regime in this country. That is to say, there is no regulation to speak out. So, going back to the melting of the Catherine Stone, who has decided that she is not going to investigate Boris Johnson's flat renovation scandal, there is this complete misleading reference to inquiries and committees. Why? Because the main democratic institution is the elected House of Commons. That is supposed to be the main democratic institution. And anyone who knows about democracy, anyone who knows about independent constitutionality would have said, stop this talk about inquiries. Let's hold the executive to account. Forget about voting. Let's have debates. Let's have a whole year of daily debates, daily sitting parliament, daily meaning every day that the parliament can sit. Let's have a debate on each and every executive decision that is scandalous, that is corrupt, that is dishonest, and so on. That would completely wipe all the excuses that the congenital liar Boris Johnson perpetrates, and all the excuses that are actually paraded on his behalf by his supporters. So the supporters, of course, will not be lining up to hold such a debate every day. Who should do that then? Of course, it should be the so-called democratic opposition, which is the Labour Party in Parliament, as misled by or misheaded by Keir Starmer. Starmer has a completely congenital criminal-like West treating. But that's it. He has got nobody else. All the other kind of members of parliament in the Labour Party guys are silent. It's only streeting that keeps getting given platforms by the right. And he's the right's choice, of course. But Starmer is not getting any debate, anything to do with any democratic or democratically holding the conservatives to account, despite the headlines to the contrary that there is a kind of question that the Labour Party has been granted a question. Can you believe the stupidity of this heading? Let's look again at this time, which is coming to 18:45 in the GMT mode and the 6:45 p.m. in the British Standard Time mode. So this one is the latest one on the Guardian. 21 minutes ago, they put this is the UK COVID. Scottish Tory leader says Boris Johnson must resign if he broke the lockdown rules. This is Scottish Tory, not the Scottish SNP. This is the one about 6 minutes ago. This is the headline they updated. That the Scottish Tory leader says Boris Johnson must resign if he broke lockdown rules. And they're saying that the live blog on the Guardian closed 6 minutes ago, is it? So this is 2 hours ago, the Tory said. Scottish Tory leader says Prime Minister must resign if he broke lockdown rules because such hypocrisy utterly despicable. Douglas Ross, the Scottish Conservative leader. If we said Scottish SNP, then that was a mistake that we unintentionally made. So we correct that and say that it was Douglas Ross, the Scottish Conservative leader, who said that Boris Johnson will have to resign if it has found that if it has found this, if it has been found, the bean is missing, that he broke lockdown regulations by attending the party in Downing Street on 20th of May 2020. So the Guardian's summary includes the statement that the Metropolitan Police have been accused of deferring to the powerful, which is what has happened according to our understanding earlier, because we said that the Metropolitan Police had been accused when they declared that they wouldn't do an investigation, criminal investigation into the Downing Street parties. But they have released a statement saying that they are going to investigate when they have been heavily criticized for the earlier stance, which is one of the things that factually contributes to the evidence that we base our comment on, that the policing is non-existent in this country. And we shall elaborate and update in due course on that one. So it said the Metropolitan Police have been accused of deferring to the powerful by not investigating Downing Street parties held in apparent breach of lockdown rules. So the earlier, it's 33 minutes ago, which is 18:55 hours GMT, the Boris Johnson attempt, the main summary reads. The main summary at 18:15, that is, reads, Boris Johnson's attempt to ignore questions about a number 10 party held during a lockdown. Let's read that again. Boris Johnson's attempt to ignore questions about a number 10 party held during lockdown by urging people to wait for the outcome of the ongoing inquiry into Partygate has failed to quell growing uproar about his conduct in his party and in the country at large. While relatively few Tory MPs have criticized him in public, in private their mood is reportedly more unforgiving. And Douglas Ross, of course, the Scottish Conservative leader, has said that if Johnson did attend the lockdown business event, as witnesses say he did, while ministers were telling the public that gatherings of this kind were banned, that would be utterly despicable. See the entry at 4:38 p.m. today, the Politics Live entry timeline, timed at 4:38 p.m. today. Douglas Ross said Johnson must resign if he has broken the rules. Two polls suggest more than half of the voters have already decided Johnson should quit. See the 3:57 p.m. timeline. Michael Ellis, a junior cabinet office minister, spent almost 90 minutes in the Commons ducking questions about whether Johnson had attended the party, that is the drinks party, and having to listen to heart-rending accounts of the anger felt by constituents who missed key moments with loved ones while number 10 staff were partying. See 2:22 p.m. There will now be intense focus on tomorrow's Prime Minister's questions, where Johnson's performance may determine whether his MPs decide to push for his removal. Why should it be performance? Why not the actual evidence? Reading the contents of these papers. For example, this one. This item in the Guardian on page 2 of the Guardian is about Baroness Underwear. Well, they don't call her the Baroness Underwear, but I'm calling her the Baroness the Underwear because that is what she is. Her name is Michelle Moon. Well, it's even worse. The sound is even worse. It's the Michelle Moon. I mean, she moans, but she's a racist. Moan as well, because there has been a report online that action has been started during the day, I think, against her over her racist comment against a man who is described as being partly of Indian so-called descent, but her racist comment is very so there is this picture of Boris Johnson in the kind of trending. Tories ridicule number 10's wall of silence. And Boris Johnson has been given a picture with his hand on his head. That is a fake kind of photo that he does whenever he wants to convey to the gullibles that he's deeply, deeply morally conflicted and morally kind of full of remorse for his failures. But that's a lie, because that's a lying tactic that Johnson has used for many years. And here is the piece in the Telegraph Politics that says Tories ridicule number 10's wall of silence on whether Boris Johnson attended lockdown garden party. Questions about the controversial event have been deflected by Downing Street on grounds that a photo, an investigation into all such claims is ongoing. And that is followed by questions about the controversial event have been deflected by Downing Street, right? Ben Riley Smith, Harry York, and Mason Boy Owen. And then there is the other one is the government ministers and the prime minister's press team have not said whether claims Mr. Johnson attended the drinks gathering on May the 20th are correct. And it goes on repeating that any questions about the kind of details have been really deflected. And this is the piece about the lies that Boris Johnson told about the number 10 parties. And it says that it was scheduled 55 minutes after Tory Minister Oliver Dowden told the well, we'll, Oliver Dowden told the nation not to meet outdoors in groups of more than two at a time. The reason this is so damaging is because Johnson has repeatedly denied all knowledge of number 10 parties and insisted that, as far as he knew, all rules were followed in number 10. Now, this is a classic telltale sign of the speaker or the person sourced lying when they say all rules were followed. I mean, that doesn't specify anything and it covers everything. And it is a complete blanket denial. If he knew about or attended the 40-person gathering, that raises a big question about the Prime Minister's claims. Now, this is a piece by Dan Bloom, posted at 1747 GMT, 11 January 2022, which is now, I mean, 1747 is almost ongoing. Now there is, well, this is 1902, but in the last kind of 2 hours. And I think there is a
event. I'm sure he'll be considering all sorts of things. But as far as I'm concerned, all the evidence I can see is that people in this building have stayed within the rules. If that turns out not to be the case, and people wish to bring allegations to my attention or to the police or whoever, then of course there will be a proper sanction.
this is a lying post. This criminal's face is criminal. And there is a picture of the Democratic Unionist Party's Jim Shannon, who broke down in the House of Commons in tears as he recalled how his mother-in-law died alone. He said, in Northern Ireland, we reached the milestone of 3,000 deaths due to COVID just last week. 3,000 people who followed the rules, including my mother-in-law who died alone. Mr. Shannon's voice choked as he struggled through the rest of his question. Tory benches were sparsely attended. Tory benches were sparsely attended while opposition MPs packed the chamber. As the Metropolitan Police confirmed, it was in talks with the Cabinet Office over the leaked email. What is that to be talking about? The police should not be talking kind of engagement. They should be investigating. So it seems that formal legal proceedings were issued against the Metropolitan Police for failing to investigate a separate number 10 Christmas party held on 18th of December 2020. And that is a reference to Joe Moon, director of the Good Law Project, who said, you can have the rule of law or you can defer to the powerful, but you can't have both. Cressida Dick's cat will know that multiple criminal offenses were committed. It shames the Metropolitan Police and ultimately all of us that she refuses to investigate. So the minister urged members of parliament to wait for the due course of events, but Labour MP Dame Angela Eagle added, what is there to wait for? The Prime Minister should come here now, fess up, and tell us what happened. Number 10 was plunged into fresh chaos last night. When it emerged, the Prime Minister, Principal Private Secretary Martin Reynolds sent an email inviting more than 100 staff to drinks in the number 10 garden on the 20th of May 2020, while outdoor gatherings were banned. Now, as I said, all the kind of contents, the text, the copy in every single one of the Fleet Street papers is factual, but also inconclusive and dishonest. Because what they're saying about this particular set of lies by Johnson and his cabal is not just a one-off set of lies, a one-off breach of the rules. It is systemic, it is endemic, and it is directly traceable to the congenital liar, Boris Johnson himself. And that the role of the House of Commons Speaker is exposed as well as being one of a dummy, one of the stooges. When open evidence is produced and published that Johnson was lying, then the Speaker should not waste any time before he orders the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, orders Boris Johnson as an MP to come to the House of Commons and tell the whole truth, which he hasn't done, which Lindsay Hoyle has not done. And let's read a bit more about this Baroness Underwear and her criminality. Now this piece, just reading the copy before commenting. The House of Lords, that is the House of Peers, commissioners for standards are considering a complaint against the Conservative peer Michelle Mone. It is spelled M-O-N-E and it is pronounced as Mone, like M-O-A-N, relating to the PPE business awarded $203 million in government contracts after she referred it to the Cabinet Office in May 2020. So the Labour peer George Foulkes complained to the commissioners on 6 January after the Guardian reported the leaked files appear to suggest Lady Moan and her husband, the Isle of Man based financier Douglas Bermann, were secretly involved in the company PPE MedPro. After the firm was awarded contracts in May and June 2020, Moan and Bermann consistently denied any role or function in PPE MedPro. Lawyers for Moan, who ran the lingerie company Ultimate before David Cameron made her a peer in 2015, have said she was not connected to PPE MedPro in any way, in any capacity. This fact that the Baroness Moan referred the company to the office of Theodore N. Agnew, her fellow conservative peer who was responsible for procurement during the COVID pandemic, was only disclosed by the government in November 2021 following a Freedom of Information request pursued by the Good Law Project. Lord Foulkes, a Labour MP from 1979 to 2005 and a former Scotland minister in Tony Blair's government, asked the commissioners to investigate whether Moan may have breached the Lord's Code of Conduct. And Foulkes told The Guardian, if Baroness Moan and her husband were involved in the company, then it appears to me that the law that she should have registered that as an interest. So what is the evidence going around about the Constable Johnson and about government and about the House of Peers, about the business that they have started to exploit to the tunes of millions and hundreds of millions of public money under the guise, under the kind of banner of COVID? And there is a piece about the latest, one of the latest items of evidence about the stupidity and incompetence of the corrupt Tower Hamlets Council. It is a piece on the website mylondon.news. It says furious Londoners couldn't get through because council missed £5 website bill. And it says Londoners were left unable to log on and claim social housing or pay tax bills because their council failed to pay a £5 website bill. Now that's the Tower Hamlets Council. Not all the councils, but Tower Hamlets Council. And the website was down for 2 days. We shall be looking more about all the crooked behavior, criminal behavior, incompetent behavior in due course in the next parts. So this is probably just over 2 hours or just under 3 hours. What is the actual length of this broadcast? I think it would be correct to say that it is. So we started at 16:30 approximately. So this is 16:30, 17:30, 1 hour, 18:30, 2 hours. So this is just under the quarter to just under 3 hours.